Hello everyone, this is Sarah's Trivia, and today we're continuing the 5 Elites of Wei Let's Talk Lore series with episode 1 of Yue Jin's arc titled The Small Man of Dong. Now, Yue Jin's background is a bit mysterious, as historical records had no mention of his birth year. What we do know is that he was from the Dong Commandery, in that he joined Cao Cao probably around 191, after Cao Cao rescued Dong from Black Mountain bandits before taking over as its new administrator. Most likely, Yue Jin was a slightly influential local, as he immediately became a clerk for Cao Cao, despite his physical appearance, which described him as a small and short man. While a simple clerk position might not mean much, Yue Jin's ability to recruit and conscript new troops from the Dong Commandery area proved immensely valuable for Cao Cao in these early days when Cao Cao had very little to his name. In record, we can see that Yue Jin was able to bring back more than 1,000 new recruits for Cao Cao's army, and for this accomplishment, Yue Jin was promoted to the position as Vice Sima and the captain of the Camp Crusher Unit, or Xianzhen Du Wei. Now, although Yue Jin probably saw plenty of action in the period between 191 to 194 from Cao Cao's many battles against the Black Mountain Bandits, the Qingzhou Yellow Turban Rebels, and later Tao Qian's troop in the Shu province, none of these were recorded in Yue Jin's chapter of record. We simply have to assume that Yue Jin fought in these battles because Cao Cao's forces were pretty much all hands on deck during this early period. Yue Jin's first recorded battle would take place in 194 against Lu Bu during the Battle of Puyang, a pivotal turning point in the battle for control of the entire Yan province. After their victory here, Lu Bu would be expelled from the Yan province in 195, and Cao Cao immediately looked for revenge against the traitors that had invited Lu Bu in the first place, as Yue Jin would end up being sent over to Yongqiu, where Zhang Miao's family, led by Zhang Miao's brother, Zhang Chao, was defending with very few troops. And with Lu Bu out of the picture, and Zhang Miao also on the run, Zhang Chao felt that the only person he could turn to was official Zhang Hong, who was the current new administrator of Dong. Now, for those of you who are confused, Cao Cao, who was the previous administrator, had already promoted himself to become the governor of the entire Yan province, and Zhang Hong, who was a former member of the coalition against Dongzhuo and now a retainer of Yuan Shao, ended up being appointed to the position by Yuan Shao, as Cao Cao and Yuan Shao were still close allies at this point. Now, the reason why Zhang Chao was convinced that Zhang Hong would come to his rescue was because Zhang Hong had previously worked under Zhang Chao for almost 6 years back when Zhang Chao was the administrator of Guangling, and Zhang Chao's assessment of their relationship would actually turn out to be right, as Zhang Hong had every intention of racing towards Yongqiu to rescue Zhang Chao and their family, but Zhang Hong's boss, Yuan Shao, forbade him from taking up arms against Cao Cao, who, as we just explained, was still a close ally and a childhood friend of Yuan Shao. And even though Zhang Hong tried to defy Yuan Shao's direct order, he still wasn't able to go rescue Zhang Chao because Yuan Shao would actually come down personally and place a siege on Dong when Zhang Hong refused his command, and in the end, this decision actually got Zhang Hong killed, as Yuan Shao would take the city and kill this rebellious administrator. So with no reinforcement at the end of the day, Zhang Chao ended up committing suicide, as Yongqiu would fall, while the rest of the Zhang clan would all end up being captured and promptly executed by Cao Cao in the end. Now, both of these battles, first against Lu Bu at Puyang and later against Zhang Chao at Yongqiu, were recorded down for Yue Jin, mainly because Yue Jin himself earned 2 of the 4 key military distinctions of ancient China during these battles. For those unfamiliar with the 4 military distinctions, they are Xiandeng, or first to scale, 斩将, or slaying of enemy generals, xianzhen, or the breaching of enemy formations, and finally 夺旗, or the taking of an enemy command flag. For Yue Jin, the two distinctions that he would earn here would be xianzhen, or the breaching of enemy formations during the Battle of Puyang, and xiandeng, or first to scale during the Battle of Yongqiu. Then later on in 197, during an attack against Yuan Shu's general, Qiao Rui, in the princedom of Chen, Yue Jin once again broke through the enemy formation for another xianzhen distinction, as after all, he was the captain of the camp crushers whose job was to break enemy formations. And these distinctions showed that Yue Jin was definitely an officer that led from the front, despite his diminutive size. And for these distinctions, Yue Jin would earn himself a minor nobility title of Guangchang Tinghou, or a low-tier marquis title of Guangchang in 197. Yue Jin would go on to participate in most of Cao Cao's earlier campaigns, as he would be part of the 198 attack on Zhangxiu, as well as the siege of Xiapi against Lü Bu later in the same year. Notably, Yue Jin's task during the siege of Xiapi was to counter and block any and all approaching reinforcement armies that was trying to break the encirclement on Xiapi. By 199, Yue Jin would be sent north to Henei under the command of Cao Ren to cut off Sui Gu's army from fleeing north towards Yuanshao. For those who might remember from our Guandu Let's Talk Lore series, Sui Gu was a former officer of Zhang Yang who ended up inheriting Zhang Yang's army after Zhang Yang's death. And in this very sensitive period prior to the Battle of Guandu itself, both Cao Cao and Yuan Shao viewed the Henei commandery as their own territory. So after Zhang Yang's death, Cao Cao would end up attacking Sui Gu and take over Henei commandery directly in 199, and this would be an event that would be seen as a direct trigger to the Guandu campaign. But before we get there, Cao Cao would still have to wrap up the year 199 with the escape and rebellion of Liu Bei back in the Xu province, and once again, Yue Jin would participate in this campaign as he would lead a major successful attack against Liu Bei's forces in Xiaopei, which finally saw him promoted to the position of Major who attacked the enemy, or Tao Kou Xiao Wei. Contrary to how busy Cao Cao's army was, Yuan Shao was still taking his sweet time in early 200, leading up to the Guandu campaign, and this lack of urgency ended up giving Cao Cao the opportunity to strike first in the north, as Yue Jin and Yu Jin would end up sharing command of a unit of 5,000 cavalry in a lightning strike north of Yellow River, targeting multiple military grain storages. And by the end of their rapid strike, Yue Jin and Yu Jin's army would have burned down over 30 military grain sites, killing over 1,000 enemy troops, and capturing over 1,000 prisoners, and even convincing over 20 minor officers of Yuan Shao to surrender to Cao Cao. Now, after this precursive strike in the north, we actually don't know Yue Jin's exact contributions during the siege of Guandu, but we do know that he was present during the Wuchao raid, and according to records, it was actually Yue Jin who ended up killing Yuan Shao's general Chun Yuqiong, as the burning of Wuchao would end up sealing the improbable victory for Cao Cao's side. Now, strangely enough, despite all of Yue Jin's achievements, he was rarely promoted. If we just compare him to our previous member of the 5 elites in Zhang Liao, then you will see that when Zhang Liao first joined Cao Cao after Lü Bu's downfall in 199, Zhang Liao was immediately given a lieutenant position and got a higher nobility title compared to Yue Jin. And in the early stages of the Guandu campaign, Zhang Liao played only a supportive role in Guan Yu's victory at Baimat against Yan Liang, and was eventually promoted to vice general after the campaign, which was at least 2 ranks higher than Yue Jin at the same time, who remained just a major despite his earlier successes with the raid with Yu Jin, and later contributions during the burning of Wuchao. And Yue Jin would stay a major until 204, when he finally earned his first general title as Youji Jiangjun, after he managed to slay Yuan Shang's general Yan Jing, at the Battle of Liyang during Cao Cao's first attack north after Yuan Shao's death. Yue Jin's accomplishments would continue to rack up, as he would be briefly sent to the Qing province to put down Yellow Turban Rebellion in Le'an before finally returning north to participate in the siege of Ye. In 205, when Yuan Tan betrayed his temporary alliance with Cao Cao, Yue Jin was ordered to lead the siege on the east gate of the city of Nanpi, where Yuan Tan chose to make his last stand. Here, Yue Jin would once again earn himself the distinction of first to scale, as he would become the first to breach the defenses of Nanpi's city walls for Cao Cao's army. Once the city defense fell, Yuan Tan tried to escape, only to be pursued and slain by Cao Cao's leopard and tiger cavalry units. Yet after all these distinctions, there are still no records of farther promotions for Yue Jin, as it would take until 206 when we have records of a letter of recommendation written by Cao Cao for Emperor Liu Xie in regards to Yue Jin. And when the emperor asked the court about Yue Jin's merits, it would be Zhang Liao who would speak up, describing Yue Jin as someone who was martially strong, tactically well-rounded, with a sound character, and someone who always led from the front. Brave, tenacious, and when in charge of the war drum to lead attacks, Yue Jin's hands seem to never tire, and his troops are always well-trained, disciplined, and never loots from civilians. When faced with difficult decisions, Yue Jin seems to always be able to pick the right response, and if we look at all his past achievements on the battlefield, then he is most definitely worthy of a promotion. And thus, with Cao Cao's letter of recommendation and Zhang Liao's raving review, the imperial court promoted Yue Jin to the position of Zhechong Jiangjun, or the general who subdues the enemy. And with Yue Jin's promotion here in 206, he would finally catch up in rank, even though his nobility title was still far inferior. In any case, this would also be the end of our first episode here. When we come back next time, we'll look at how General Yue Jin continued to subdue the enemy. Hopefully you all have enjoyed this episode enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more content on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below, or just by hitting the like button. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye!